Have you ever felt trapped, as if life was piling on bigger and bigger obstacles? Lucas, a dedicated and hard-working father, was drowning in debt and doubt, unaware that a simple decision would change everything. What started with skepticism led him on a journey of hope, exciting twists, and an ending that no one could foresee. Want to know how he turned the impossible into reality? Stay until the end, because this story might change your perspective too. Before we begin, make sure to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for more inspiring stories. Shall we go together? Have you ever had that moment and you look in the mirror and don't recognize who's there? That was me. My name is Lucas, I'm 35 years old, and for a long time, the word that best defined my life was survival. I worked as a car salesman, and even though I tried my hardest, it never seemed to be enough. Every night, after putting my son Gabriel to bed, would collapse on the couch and stare at the ceiling of my small apartment. Sometimes, the only light came from the television, but even that didn't help distract my mind. The kitchen table was a constant reminder of the weight I carried, a pile of overdue bills, some with red ink that kept me awake at night. "Dad, are you going to be able to buy the new school uniform tomorrow?" Gabriel asked, holding my arm as he got ready for sleep. "Of course, son. Don't worry, Dad will take care of it." I smiled at him, trying to hide the lump in my throat. But the truth was different. I had no idea where I would get the money. The rent was overdue, the car I used for work had pending payments, and the bank balance, well, it was better not to mention it. Sometimes, I wondered, where did I go wrong? I wasn't lazy. I wasn't irresponsible. It just seemed that the harder I tried, the more life pulled me back. That night, after Gabriel fell asleep, I grabbed my phone and started venting to a friend on WhatsApp. "Man, I'm at my limit. I don't know what else to do." I typed quickly. The reply came in seconds. "Lucas, you need to be realistic. Things are tough for everyone. Just work more and hang in there." Work more? It was as if I was already exhausting the time I didn't have. I stared at the screen, feeling that emptiness. I got up, went to the kitchen, and opened a beer. I sat at the table, staring at the bills again. How did I get here? I murmured to myself. At that moment, the sound of heavy rain started beating against the window. Funny how the sound of the wind and rain seemed to echo my own confusion. I grabbed an old notebook that was lying in the corner of the shelf. I don't know why, but I felt the urge to write. Maybe it was an attempt to organize the chaos inside my head. I opened the notebook to the first page and stared at the blank sheet. What if my life could be different? I asked aloud, not expecting a response. I pulled out a pen, but before I could write anything, the tears came. I didn't know where to start. It was as if all the words I needed to say were stuck. And then, in that moment, I thought of Gabriel. He deserved more. I deserved more. I wrote the first words, "I want to change my life." I woke up the next morning with the feeling that something needed to change. I still didn't know what, but that scribbled phrase in the notebook felt like a silent scream inside me. The day started like any other, late, tired, and carrying the weight of everything I had. During a break at work, between attending customers and organizing papers, I sat at the small cafeteria table at the dealership. I took out my phone and started aimlessly scrolling through YouTube. First, the usual videos, bad news, people traveling, things that seemed so far from my reality. Then, the algorithm decided to show me something different. The title was something like, "How to Manifest the Life of Your Dreams Using the Law of Attraction." I laughed. I literally chuckled there, alone in the room. Manifest? With thoughts? You've got to be kidding me, I murmured. But for some reason, I clicked on the video. The woman on the screen had contagious energy. She spoke with an almost annoying certainty. You can change your life right now. It all starts with what you believe. Wealth, love, happiness, they are within your reach. The universe responds to your vibration. I closed the video within the first few minutes. It was ridiculous. I needed money, not a motivational speech. Minutes later, while responding to a customer on WhatsApp, something made me open the video again. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe desperation. The woman continued, the life you desire already exists. It's just waiting for you to believe. I shook my head, disbelieving, but something about that phrase kept echoing. For the rest of the day, I couldn't get it out of my mind. That night, after Gabriel went to sleep, the rain started again. I sat in the living room with the notebook in hand. I looked at that first sentence I had written the night before. I want to change my life. Does this make any sense? I said aloud, as if waiting for an answer from beyond. I picked up the pen and started writing. There was no method or rules. I just let my thoughts flow. I want to pay off my debts. I want to provide the best for my son. I want to live without fear of tomorrow. The dreams poured out of me like water. I wrote about trips I had never taken, a comfortable house, a peaceful life. As I wrote, something strange happened. For a moment, I could imagine myself living that. It was as if I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in a long time. The next day, I brought up the video with Paulo, my coworker. Man, do you believe you can change your life with positive thinking? He laughed right away. Lucas, are you seeing these internet things now? Stop being foolish. This is for those who don't want to face reality. I laughed along, but inside, that seed had already been planted. That night, I watched another video. This time, the host talked about visualizing the future you want. Even without fully believing it, I closed my eyes and tried. I imagined my life without debts, Gabriel with a smile on his face, and that peace that seemed so distant. Deep down, I was still skeptical, but for the first time in a long time, there was a spark of hope. In the first few days, I tried to convince myself that this could work. Every night, after putting Gabriel to sleep, would sit at the kitchen table, open my notebook, and write. Simple things, as if it were a wish list. I want to pay all the bills. I want a new car. I want to wake up calm. But deep down, I felt it was useless. No matter how many times I wrote, the problems were still there, screaming in my face. It was like trying to put out a fire with a cup of water. One night, while I was writing, my mind rebelled. I looked at those words and thought, who am I trying to fool? I've always lived broke. This isn't going to change anything. I slammed the notebook shut and pushed the chair back. I paced back and forth in the small apartment, feeling that familiar knot in my chest. The next morning, Paulo called me for coffee during work. He was one of the few friends I had there and always struck up a conversation when he noticed I was quieter than usual. So, Lucas, how's it going? He asked, stirring his coffee with a spoon. It's all good, or at least, the way it always is, right? I replied, lacking much energy. He laughed, but with a tone of sarcasm. You've been acting kind of weird lately. Are you really okay? Or does this have to do with that manifesting money thing? I sighed, out of patience. Paulo, look at the state of my life. What do I have to lose by trying? Reality, Lucas. Reality is what matters. This attracting wealth thing isn't going to pay your bills. You need to sell more cars, go after it. And you think I don't already do that? I snapped back, more irritated than I wanted to be. The conversation got heavy, and the rest of the day was worse. Every time I tried to focus on work, those words echoed, "Do you think a notebook is going to pay your bills?" That night, Gabriel noticed my restlessness. He was drawing in the living room while I tried to organize bills on the table. "Dad, why are you so serious?" I looked at him and forced a smile. "I'm just thinking, son." He placed the drawing on the table, a red car with a huge house in the background. "When you're rich, are we going to live in a house like that?" he asked, his eyes shining. For a moment, I couldn't answer. It was as if that simple question carried the weight of my failure. "Who knows, right?" I said, trying not to show the pain I felt. After Gabriel went to bed, I sat on the couch, looking at the notebook. I thought about giving up. The bills were still there, the balance was still negative, and now even Paolo doubted me. But deep down, something small told me to keep going. I didn't know if it was hope or desperation, but that night I decided to give it one more chance. The days dragged on, and although I continued writing in the notebook, my faith in it was hanging by a thread. It was a mechanical effort, more out of habit than real hope. The debts continued to haunt me, and even Gabriel seemed to notice that I was quieter. It was on an apparently ordinary afternoon at work that something different happened. I was at the desk, reorganizing the sales papers when a customer walked into the dealership. He was an older man with gray hair, dressed simply, but with a presence that drew attention. "Good afternoon," I greeted, trying to sound cheerful. "Good afternoon, young man. I'm looking for a car for my daughter. Any recommendations?" I started showing him some options, talking about models and payment conditions. He seemed genuinely interested but in no hurry. After a few minutes of conversation, he paused and looked at me with a light smile. "You seem to have a lot on your shoulders, young man. Is everything okay?" The question caught me off guard. Normally, I didn't talk about my life with customers, but for some reason, that man had a calm way about him that made me lower my guard. "To be honest, sir, no. Life hasn't been easy. It feels like no matter how hard I try, things just keep getting worse." He nodded, as if he understood exactly what I was feeling. "I've been in that place. I remember a time when I worked 16 hours a day and still felt like I was sinking." "And how did you get out of it?" I asked, curious. "I changed my way of thinking and acting. I discovered that to change reality, we first need to change how we see and feel about ourselves." I laughed, almost unwillingly. "Sounds like one of those law of attraction things we see on the internet. And what's wrong with that?" he countered, without losing his calm tone. I was silent for a few seconds until he continued. "There's a technique that helped me a lot, scripting. Have you heard of it?" I shook my head. "No, never. It's simple. Every night, you take a notebook and write as if you are already living the life you want. It's not just about listing goals, but describing in detail. How do you feel? What are you doing? Who is by your side? The secret is not just to believe but to act and feel as if it's already real." That echoed in my head. He explained it with such enthusiasm that it made me question my skepticism. Before leaving, the man shook my hand and said, "Remember, young man, the universe responds to clarity. The clearer you are about what you want, the faster the doors will open." That night, I opened my notebook with a different perspective. I wrote entire pages, not as someone wishing, but as someone who was already living it. I described my new house, my full bank account, and Gabriel's happiness upon seeing our new car. And for the first time, I felt real hope. After that conversation with the gentleman at the dealership, something inside me changed. For the first time, I wasn't just writing in the notebook, I was putting real emotion into it. Every night, before going to sleep, would sit with it in hand and imagine in detail the life I wanted. The smell of the new house, the sound of the new car's engine, Gabriel's smile. It was almost like a game, but somehow, it made me feel different. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The bills were still there, the debts continued to haunt me, and work remained the same. But then, something unexpected happened. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was stepping out for lunch when I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Mr. Lucas? This is Claudia from the HR department of your former job. We are reviewing some old reports and noticed that an annual bonus was never paid to you. Could you confirm your address so we can send the amount? For a moment, I thought it was a prank. Bonus? What do you mean? Yes, sir. It's about 2,000 euros, including interest. The payment should be processed next week. I hung up the phone in shock. It was as if the universe had heard my words and decided to give me a push. When I told Paolo the news, he laughed. Look at that, Lucas. It seems the law of attraction works, huh? Keep laughing, but something is happening, I replied, with a smile I couldn't hide. With that money, I was able to pay off some of the smaller debts, which took a huge weight off my shoulders. The feeling of making progress, even if just a little, was completely new to me. A few days later, another surprise. A client I had served months earlier referred me to a friend who was interested in a fleet of cars for his small business. It was the kind of sale I never managed to close, but this time, I felt different. I remembered what the gentleman at the dealership had said, the universe responds to clarity. Before calling the client, I closed my eyes for a few minutes and imagined myself signing the contract, celebrating the sale. When I finally made the call, my voice was filled with confidence. The client scheduled a meeting for the next day, and everything flowed surprisingly well. In the end, he decided to close the deal, and that was the largest commission I had received in years. When I got home that night, Gabriel ran to me. Daddy, you look happy. I hugged him tightly, with tears in my eyes. I am, son. Very happy. It wasn't just the money. It was the feeling that, finally, my life was getting back on track. Each small victory reinforced my belief that this process worked. From that moment on, I realized it wasn't just about dreaming. It was about believing, acting, and opening myself up to what life had to offer. 3 months had passed since the day I decided to take that gentleman's advice at the dealership seriously. Since then, everything began to change, little by little, like a tide that rises almost imperceptibly. But I wasn't prepared for what was about to happen. It was a sunny morning when I received a call that would leave me speechless. Hello, is this Mr. Lucas? Said a female voice on the other end. Yes, it is. Who's calling? This is Mariana from Tech Fleet Solutions. We are expanding our fleet of vehicles and need a reliable supplier. We received your recommendation from one of our partners and would like to schedule a meeting to discuss the terms. My heart raced. Tech Fleet Solutions was a well-known company, large enough to change the life of any salesperson who closed a deal with them. Sure, we can schedule that. I replied, trying to hide my excitement. I spent the rest of the day preparing for that meeting. It wasn't just another sale, it was the sale that could change everything. That night, before going to bed, I wrote in my notebook with more detail than ever. I described every step of the negotiation, the smile on Gabriel's face when I told him the news, even the smell of the car I would buy after the commission. On the day of the meeting, I walked into the conference room with a mix of nerves and confidence. The executives from TechFleet were there, ready to hear my proposal. I presented the available models, negotiated terms and prices, and used every ounce of energy to convey confidence. In the end, the company's director smiled and said, "I liked your approach, Lucas. Let's close the contract with you." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I held back my emotions as much as I could until I left the room. As soon as I got in the car, I closed the door and broke down. The tears came without warning, but they weren't tears of sadness. It was the weight of months, years, finally being released. The commission from that contract was 500,000 euros. I never imagined a check could change my perception of myself so much. It wasn't just the money, it was proof that I could do more, that my effort, my belief, and my actions had resulted in something extraordinary. When I got home that night, Gabriel was playing in the living room. He ran to me as soon as he saw me. "Daddy, how was work?" I knelt in front of him, holding his small face in my hands. "It was amazing, son. We did it." He didn't exactly understand what that meant, but he hugged me tightly, and in that moment I knew, it was all worth it. Looking back, I realized that the money was just part of the transformation. The true gift was the feeling of control over my life, something I thought was impossible just months ago. And now, I knew that the sky was the limit. A few weeks had passed since I received the check. My life changed in so many ways that it felt like a dream. I paid off all the debts that haunted me, renegotiated the rent, and finally managed to get Gabriel out of the cramped apartment and into a house with a backyard where he could run and play. "Daddy, look! There's space for us to plant a tree here," he exclaimed, running across the lawn on our first morning in the new house. "A tree, huh?" I asked, laughing. "What do you think about planting a lemon tree? That way you can make juice whenever you want." He laughed, excited, and started planning where our tree would go. Seeing that sparkle in his eyes was all I needed. But the biggest change wasn't in what I bought or what I paid. It was inside me. Before, I saw myself as someone doomed to failure, as if no matter what I did, life would never give me a fair chance. Today, I realized that it wasn't life that needed to change, it was the way I viewed the world. That night, I sat down with the same notebook where it all began. Not to write more dreams, but to reflect on what I had learned. I wrote, "Manifestation isn't magic. It's not just thinking positive and waiting for everything to fall from the sky. It's believing in what you deserve and working as if it's already real." It was at that moment that I remembered the man from the dealership, the one who planted the idea of scripting in my head. I decided I needed to thank him. I went back to the dealership a few days later, hopeful to find him. I asked my manager if he remembered that specific customer, but he shook his head. "Lucas, no customer with that description has been here in the last few months." "Are you sure about that?" I stood there for a few minutes, confused. Did I imagine him? It didn't make sense, but somehow, it only reinforced my gratitude. That same week, I met Paolo for lunch. He couldn't stop looking at me with a surprised expression as I told him everything that had happened. "Dude, I don't know how you did it, but I've never seen someone change so much in such a short time. The truth, Paolo, is that the money was just the beginning. What really changed was how I see opportunities. I stopped seeing barriers and started seeing possibilities." He was silent for a moment, then laughed. "And you still have to teach me this magic notebook thing." I laughed along but made it clear, it's not the notebook. It's the clarity. When you believe in what you want and act as if it's already real, the universe aligns. Today, sitting in the backyard, watching Gabriel play, I realized that the true gift wasn't just the money, but the freedom to believe in myself. And you, what do you think you could achieve if you started believing in the impossible? Did you enjoy this story of overcoming and transformation? Then leave your like to support our channel. Comment below, do you believe in the power of change and manifestation? We really want to know your opinion. And if you're not subscribed yet, take this opportunity to subscribe now and activate the bell so you don't miss any inspiring stories like this one. Together, we'll continue discovering that everything is possible when we believe.